During her pregnancy checkup, the doctor suddenly turned pale and whispered, "Who was your previous doctor?" She calmly replied, "My husband. He's an obstetrician." In an instant, the doctor panicked, stepped back and said, "We need proof, right now." The examination room felt smaller with each passing second as Annabel Wallace watched Dr. Reynolds' expression shift from professional concern to something closer to horror. The file lay open between them, pages filled with Brian's neat handwriting documenting complications that Annabel had never experienced. "Mrs. Malone, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say." Dr. Reynolds set down the ultrasound images with hands that trembled slightly. "According to these records transferred from your husband's practice, you should be in critical condition right now. Severe preeclampsia, dangerously elevated blood pressure, protein levels indicating kidney failure. The medications listed here are used for women at extreme risk of seizures or death." Annabel's hand moved instinctively to her rounded belly. 22 weeks pregnant, and until this moment, she'd believed everything was perfect. Brian had assured her the pregnancy was progressing beautifully, normal, healthy, nothing to worry about. "I don't understand. Brian said everything looked good at my last appointment. That's the problem." Dr. Reynolds pulled up Annabel's actual test results from the examination she'd just completed. "Your blood pressure is textbook normal. Your urine shows no protein. Your baby's measurements are exactly where they should be. You're having one of the healthiest pregnancies I've seen this month, but these records claim you're dying." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire Annabel couldn't yet see. She stared at the contradictory files, her mind struggling to make sense of what Dr. Reynolds was suggesting without quite saying it aloud. "There must be some mistake. Files got mixed up. Brian wouldn't—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence because finishing it meant acknowledging something too terrible to consider. "Mrs. Malone, I've been practicing obstetrics for nearly 20 years. I know what filing errors look like. This isn't that." Dr. Reynolds leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. "Someone deliberately created a false medical history showing your pregnancy is high risk when you're completely healthy. The only person with access and authority to create these records is your husband." Annabel felt the room tilt. "Why would Brian falsify my medical records?" "I don't know. But I'm legally required to report suspected medical fraud to the licensing board. Before I do that, I wanted to give you a chance to understand what's happening. Go home. Look through his things if you can do it safely. If there's an innocent explanation, we'll sort it out. But if there's not—" Dr. Reynolds' eyes held a warning Annabel didn't want to understand. "If there's not, you need to protect yourself." The drive home felt like moving through water. Every thought moved slowly, struggled against the weight of disbelief. Brian was her husband, the father of her child, a respected doctor who saved lives. He wouldn't create fake medical records about his own wife's pregnancy. There had to be a rational explanation. But the rational explanations crumbled under examination. Mixed-up files didn't explain medications prescribed specifically to her. Clerical errors didn't account for detailed notes about complications she'd never mentioned because she'd never experienced them. Computer glitches didn't forge Brian's distinctive handwriting across every page. Their house stood silent and perfect when Annabel arrived. Everything in its place. The home they'd built together, decorated with care, filled with plans for the nursery they'd soon prepare. She'd quit her job as a medical receptionist when they married because Brian wanted a proper doctor's wife, someone to support his career, host dinner parties, eventually raise their children. She'd given up her independence willingly, believing she was building something beautiful. Now she stood in the foyer wondering if she'd built a prison instead. Brian's home office was always locked. Patient confidentiality, he'd explained, HIPAA regulations. She'd never questioned it. Why would she? She trusted him completely. The emergency key was hidden behind the takeout menus in the kitchen junk drawer. Her hands shook as she retrieved it. Part of her wanted to stop, to wait for Brian to come home and explain everything innocently. But a larger part, The part that had listened to Dr. Reynolds's carefully chosen words needed to know the truth. The key turned smoothly. The office door swung open to reveal Brian's sanctuary. Mahogany desk, leather chair, medical journals stacked precisely, framed diplomas covering one wall. Everything screamed success, competence, trustworthiness. The desk drawers held ordinary things at first: pens, notepads, pharmaceutical samples. But the bottom drawer, the one that required a different key entirely, contained something that made Annabelle's blood run cold. Life insurance policies. 4 of them, all taken out within the past year, all listing Annabelle as the insured party. She calculated the total with numb fingers: $6 million. If she died, Brian would receive $6 million. Why would her husband need $6 million in life insurance on a former receptionist with no career and no income? The premiums alone must cost thousands monthly. Brian earned good money, but not wealthy enough to throw away insurance premiums unless he expected a return on the investment, unless he was planning for her to die. The thought arrived fully formed and undeniable. Annabelle sat down hard in Brian's leather chair, the insurance documents scattered across her lap. He was planning to kill her. The falsified medical records weren't errors, they were preparation, creating a paper trail showing a high-risk pregnancy so that when she died during childbirth, no one would question it. Complications happened, especially to black women. Everyone knew the statistics. Brian could play the devastated widower, collect millions, and no one would ever suspect murder. She should have stopped looking then, should have grabbed her purse and run. But something drove her to keep searching, to understand the full scope of what her husband had planned. The filing cabinet in the corner yielded more secrets. Behind Brian's medical journals, hidden in a folder marked Research, Annabelle found medical records for someone named Jennifer Walsh. The file followed the same pattern as Annabelle's fabricated records: healthy pregnancy suddenly showing complications, preeclampsia appearing out of nowhere, high-risk medications, detailed notes documenting a deteriorating condition, and at the end, a death certificate. Jennifer Walsh had died 9 months ago from hemorrhage during childbirth, listed as unavoidable complication from severe preeclampsia. Except if Jennifer's file looked like Annabelle's file, the complications probably weren't real, which meant Jennifer Walsh had been murdered. And Annabelle was next. She photographed everything with shaking hands: the insurance policies, Jennifer's file, her own falsified records, evidence that would mean nothing in court because she'd obtained it illegally, but evidence that proved she wasn't crazy, that the danger was real. The front door opened downstairs. Annabelle froze, Brian's files still spread across his desk. He wasn't supposed to be home for hours. His Thursday surgery schedule always ran late into the evening. She glanced at the clock and realized with horror that hours had passed while she'd been searching. She'd lost track of time completely. "Annabelle?" Brian's voice carried up the stairs. "Your car's in the driveway, but you're not answering. Where are you?" She shoved documents back into drawers with frantic speed. Her phone was in her pocket with the photographs. Evidence secured, even if she couldn't hide what she'd done. The desk drawer wouldn't close properly. Papers stuck out at odd angles. Brian would know immediately that someone had been in his things. His footsteps sounded on the stairs, heavy, steady, getting closer. Annabelle stood in the center of his office, Jennifer Walsh's file still in her hands because she'd run out of time to hide it. The door swung open. Brian stood in the doorway in his hospital scrubs, his doctor's bag in one hand, his eyes moving from her face to the open cabinet to the file she was holding. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Annabelle watched something shift behind her husband's eyes. The warmth drained away like water down a sink. The kind, caring expression she'd loved for 2 years of marriage evaporated, leaving something cold and calculating underneath. She'd never seen this face before. This was the real Brian Malone, the one he'd hidden behind charm and concern. "You weren't supposed to find those yet," he said quietly, his voice empty of emotion. He stepped into the office and closed the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. Chapter 2. The Truth. Brian didn't raise his voice, which somehow made everything worse. "Put the file down, Annabelle." He gestured to his desk with the same gentle authority he used with nervous patients. "We need to have an adult conversation about what you think you've discovered." "I know what I discovered." Annabelle's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Insurance policies worth millions. A dead woman's medical records that look exactly like the fake records you created for me. You're planning to kill me." Planning implies future tense. Brian set down his doctor's bag with careful precision. "I prefer to think of it as contingency planning, and you're simplifying a complex situation." The casual admission stole her breath. No denial, no explanation. Just acknowledgement delivered as calmly as discussing dinner plans. Who was Jennifer Walsh? Someone who made things complicated. Brian moved to his liquor cabinet and poured whiskey into a crystal glass. He didn't offer her any. "She was a pharmaceutical representative I met at a conference. The affair was supposed to be temporary, discreet, a way to blow off steam from the pressures of my practice. But Jennifer developed feelings, started talking about us building a future together. Then she got pregnant, and everything became infinitely more complicated." Each word landed like a physical blow. Annabelle gripped the edge of the desk to stay upright. "You killed her!" "I solved a problem that threatened everything I'd worked for." Brian sipped his whiskey, studying her over the rim of the glass. "Jennifer wanted me to leave you, marry her, play happy family with her baby. That would have destroyed my career." Scandal ruins doctors, Annabelle. Patients don't trust physicians who abandon their wives for mistresses. Hospital administrators don't promote doctors with messy personal lives. My entire future would have evaporated because of one careless mistake. "So, you murdered her." "I created medical documentation showing she had severe preeclampsia. During delivery, I administered medications that ensured she would hemorrhage. I waited just long enough before calling for help that the outcome was inevitable. The hospital review board ruled it a tragic but unavoidable complication. Her family received a settlement. Problem solved." He said it all without inflection, reporting facts rather than confessing murder. Annabelle's legs gave out. She sank into his desk chair, one hand pressed to her mouth to hold back the bile rising in her throat. "You're telling me this? Just telling me? Because you already know, and because we need to discuss what happens next." Brian sat down across from her, crossing his legs with casual ease. "You see, I have a choice to make. You're carrying my child, which I value. I genuinely want to be a father. But you've become a liability. You ask too many questions. You don't trust me the way you used to. I can feel you pulling away even before you found these files. That makes you dangerous. So you were going to kill me too." It wasn't a question. The insurance policies weren't just for show. $6 million would provide a very comfortable life for me and our child. I'd be the tragic widower, raising my daughter alone after losing my beloved wife to pregnancy complications. Everyone would sympathize. No one would question it. Black women die from childbirth complications at alarming rates. The statistics would protect me, just like they protected me with Jennifer. The calculation in his voice was inhuman. Annabelle stared at the man she'd married and couldn't find any trace of the person she'd thought she loved. "Our daughter. You'd raise our daughter knowing you murdered her mother." "Children are resilient. She'd never know. I'd hire an excellent nanny. She'd have every advantage money could provide. Honestly, she'd probably have a better life than you could give her anyway. You have no career, no income, no prospects. I'd be doing her a favor." The narcissism was breathtaking. Brian genuinely believed killing her would benefit their child, that his convenience mattered more than her life. "I won't let you." Annabelle stood on shaking legs, moving toward the door. "I'm leaving, right now. I'm going to the police and telling them everything." Brian was faster. He moved between her and the exit with a speed that belied his casual demeanor. "And tell them what? That you illegally broke into my office and found files you're not qualified to interpret. That you think your husband is planning to kill you based on insurance policies and a tragic patient death from months ago. With what evidence? I have photographs. Your confession, the falsified records. Photographs obtained through breaking and entering, a confession given in our private home with no witnesses or recording, medical records you stole. Brian's smile was gentle, almost pitying. Annabelle, you have nothing that would hold up in court, and I have weeks of documented evidence showing you've been behaving erratically, text messages where you seem confused, voicemails where you sound paranoid. I've been building a case that you're having pregnancy-induced psychosis. When you start making wild accusations about murder, everyone will assume you're having a mental health crisis. No one will believe that. Everyone will believe it. I'm a respected physician. You're an unemployed housewife with no credibility. Who do you think they'll trust? He moved closer, his voice dropping to something almost tender. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget everything you saw here tonight. You're going to go back to being my loving, supportive wife. You're going to have our baby. And if you're very good, if you never speak about this again, I might let you survive long enough to see her grow up. And if I'm not good... Brian's hand shot out and grabbed her arm, yanking her close enough to see the complete absence of warmth in his eyes. Then you'll have an accident. Soon. Tonight even. A fall down the stairs. A tragic miscarriage. Maybe you'll hemorrhage too badly for even me to save you. These things happen, Annabelle. Pregnancy is dangerous. Everyone knows that. She tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her mother's terror. Brian's free hand moved to her belly, resting there in a mockery of paternal tenderness. Decide now, he said softly. Live with the secret, or die with it, but choose fast, because my patience has limits. Annabelle looked into her husband's eyes and understood that he would absolutely kill her, right now, tonight. If she gave him any reason to believe, she'd expose him. She thought of Jennifer Walsh dying in a hospital bed while Brian watched and did nothing. She thought of her daughter growing inside her, innocent and unaware that her father was a monster. I'll stay quiet, she whispered, hating herself for the lie but needing to survive long enough to find another way out. I won't tell anyone, I promise. Good girl. Brian released her arm and kissed her forehead with terrible gentleness. I knew you'd be reasonable. Now go downstairs and make dinner while I clean up this mess you've made. We'll pretend this conversation never happened. Annabelle walked out of the office on numb legs. She made it halfway down the stairs before her body betrayed her. Her foot caught on something, or maybe her shaking legs simply gave out. She fell forward, tumbling down the remaining steps in a confusion of pain and terror. She landed hard on the hallway floor. Agony exploded through her abdomen. When she looked down, blood was spreading across her clothes. Dark. Too much. The baby. Something was wrong with the baby. Brian! She screamed his name, terror overriding everything else. Help me! Something's wrong! He appeared at the top of the stairs, looking down at her with clinical detachment. He checked his watch, studied the blood, made no move to help. You're hemorrhaging, he observed calmly. I'd estimate you have 15 to 20 minutes before it becomes life-threatening. So let's be clear about our arrangement. You stay quiet about everything you found, everything I told you, and I call an ambulance right now, or you threaten to expose me, and I wait until it's too late to save you. Then I tell the paramedics I came home and found you collapsed. Tragic accident. These things happen. Annabelle lay bleeding on her hallway floor while her husband decided whether to let her die. The pain was excruciating. The baby wasn't moving. She was losing everything in real time, and Brian stood there calculating the best outcome for himself. Please, she gasped. Please save our baby. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't let her die. Brian studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. Yes, I need an ambulance. My wife fell down the stairs. She's pregnant and bleeding heavily. Please hurry. He knelt beside her while they waited, his hand stroking her hair with terrible tenderness. Remember this moment, Annabelle. Remember that I hold your life and our daughter's life in my hands. You exist because I allow it. Don't ever forget that." The ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics rushed in, started IVs, asked questions Brian answered with perfect concern. He rode with her to the hospital, playing the terrified husband flawlessly. And as consciousness faded from blood loss and pain, Annabelle's last thought was that she'd just made a deal with a monster who would absolutely kill her the moment she stopped being useful. But she'd survive tonight, and tomorrow she'd figure out how to destroy him before he destroyed her. Chapter 3. The Alliance. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Annabelle woke to beeping monitors and the weight of Brian's hand on hers. He sat beside her bed, the picture of a devoted husband, his face arranged in careful concern. But when the nurse left and they were alone, his expression shifted to something colder. "The baby's fine," he said quietly. "You're fine." The bleeding stopped. "Apparently, you're tougher than you look." "What happened?" Her voice came out hoarse. "You fell." "Trauma caused some bleeding, but nothing catastrophic. They want to keep you overnight for observation." His thumb stroked across her knuckles in a gesture that would look loving to anyone watching. "I told the doctors you've been dizzy lately. Stress from the pregnancy. They think you should rest more, avoid stairs. Everyone's very concerned about you." The message was clear. He'd created a narrative. Annabelle was unstable, stressed, prone to accidents. If something worse happened, he'd already planted the seeds of a believable story. "I need to use the bathroom," she said. Brian helped her up with solicitous care. The moment the bathroom door closed between them, Annabelle sagged against the sink. Her reflection showed a woman she barely recognized. Pale, terrified, trapped. She'd promised to stay quiet, made a deal to survive, but deals with monsters only lasted until the monster decided they didn't. Brian would kill her eventually. The insurance policies proved that. The only question was when. She flushed the toilet for effect and returned to find Brian checking his phone. "I need to run back to the hospital for a few hours. Emergency consult. Will you be all right here alone?" "Of course." She forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just tired. Rest. I'll be back before midnight." He kissed her forehead and left, his footsteps fading down the hallway. The moment he was gone, a different nurse entered. Older, black, with kind eyes that held something knowing. Her name tag read, Ruth. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Ruth asked while checking Annabelle's vital signs. "Physically, better. Otherwise..." Annabelle couldn't finish the sentence. Ruth glanced at the closed door, then back at Annabelle. "I've been an obstetrics nurse for 30 years. I've seen a lot of women come through these doors. Some are scared of childbirth, some are scared of single motherhood, and some are scared of their husbands." She paused meaningfully. "Which kind are you?" The direct question cracked something in Annabelle's carefully maintained composure. Tears she'd been holding back since finding the files spilled over. "The third kind." Ruth pulled a chair close and sat down, her voice dropping low. "Your husband is Dr. Brian Malone. I remember him from a case 2 years ago. A young woman, emergency delivery, massive hemorrhage. Dr. Malone was attending. She didn't make it. Something about that case never sat right with me. The way he handled the emergency. How he seemed more interested in his documentation than in saving her. But he's respected and I'm just a nurse, so I kept my mouth shut. Until now." Annabelle's breath caught. 2 years ago. Was her name Jennifer Walsh? Ruth's eyes widened. "You know about her?" "I found her medical files in Brian's office. He created fake complications in her records. Then he killed her and made it look natural." The words tumbled out in a rush. "He's planning to do the same thing to me. I found life insurance policies worth millions. He's going to stage complications during my delivery and let me die, just like Jennifer." "Do you have proof?" "Photographs. His confession. But he says no one will believe me. that I obtained everything illegally, and he'll claim I'm mentally unstable. Annabelle gripped Ruth's hand desperately. I promised him I'd stay quiet, but he's going to kill me anyway. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but eventually. I need help. I need someone who'll believe me. Ruth was quiet for a long moment, studying Annabelle's face. Then she pulled out a pen and scribbled something on a paper towel. There's a doctor named Daniel Harper. He runs urgent care clinics around the city. About 10 years ago, your husband destroyed his career with a false sexual harassment complaint. Daniel was better at their job than Brian could stand, so Brian made sure Daniel would never work in a hospital again. If anyone understands how dangerous Brian Malone is, and if anyone wants to see him face consequences, it's Daniel Harper. Why are you helping me? Because I didn't help Jennifer Walsh. I saw the signs something was wrong and I stayed quiet. I've regretted that every day since. Ruth pressed the paper towel into Annabelle's palm. This is Daniel's number. Memorize it and destroy this. Don't call from any phone Brian has access to, and be smart about when you reach out. If Brian suspects you're getting help, he might accelerate his plans. What do I do in the meantime? Survive. Play the role he expects. Make him think you're broken and compliant. Buy yourself time to build a real plan. Ruth squeezed Annabelle's hand. You're stronger than you know, sweetheart. You survived tonight. You can survive long enough to fight back. Brian returned before midnight as promised, bringing flowers and concern. He asked how she was feeling, whether she needed anything, if the baby was moving normally. Every gesture screamed devotion. Every word was a performance for the nurses who drifted in and out. But when they were alone in the dark, his voice dropped to something else entirely. You did well tonight. Kept your promises. I appreciate that. Keep it up, and maybe we'll all survive this. Annabelle lay in the dark after he fell asleep in the chair beside her bed. She thought about Jennifer Walsh dead because she'd loved the wrong man. She thought about Ruth, carrying guilt for not acting when she'd had suspicions. She thought about her daughter growing inside her, innocent and unaware that her father was planning her mother's murder. Daniel Harper. The name felt like a lifeline thrown across dark water. They released her the next day with instructions to rest and avoid stress. Brian drove her home, settled her on the couch with pillows and blankets, made her lunch with attentive care. He was gentle, loving, exactly what a concerned husband should be, which made it worse somehow. Knowing the gentleness was calculation. That every kind gesture served his ultimate goal of making her death look natural when it finally happened. She waited 3 days. 3 days of playing the grateful wife. 3 days of taking the pills Brian gave her while pretending not to notice how different they looked from her prenatal vitamins. 3 days of planning. On the 4th day, Brian left for work with his usual kiss and reminder to rest. The moment his car disappeared down the street, Annabelle went to the kitchen landline. She couldn't use her cell phone. Brian might check the call history. But the landline was old, barely used, easy to access. Her hands shook as she dialed the number Ruth had given her. It rang twice before a man answered. Harper Medical. This is Daniel. My name is Annabelle Malone. My husband is Brian Malone and he's going to kill me for insurance money. Ruth from Mercy Hospital said you might help me destroy him. Silence on the other end. Then, where are you right now? Home. Alone. He's at work. Are you in immediate danger? Not today, but I don't know how much time I have before he makes his move. I found evidence. Insurance policies. Another woman he killed. He admitted everything, but he says no one will believe me, and I don't know what to do. Okay. Listen carefully. We can't talk on a landline he might monitor. Do you know the coffee shop on Grant Street? Yes. Be there tomorrow at 10. I'll be sitting alone near the back. Approach me like you're surprised to see an old friend. Can you do that without Brian suspecting? I can say I'm meeting a friend from my old job. He won't question that. Good. Come tomorrow. Bring copies of any evidence you can access safely. We'll figure this out together. Daniel's voice was calm, steady, nothing like Brian's calculated charm. Annabelle, I need you to know something. I believe you. I've known Brian was dangerous for years but couldn't prove it. You might be the chance to finally stop him. The words nearly broke her. Someone believed her. After days of feeling crazy and trapped and helpless, someone actually believed her. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but you're not alone anymore. Remember that. She hung up and erased the call from the phone's history. Then she sat on her kitchen floor and cried. Not from fear, though fear was still there, but from something else. Hope. For the first time since finding those files, she had actual hope that she might survive this. That night, Brian came home cheerful. He'd had a good day, successful surgeries, positive patient outcomes. He cooked dinner, asked about her day, rubbed her feet while they watched television. Every gesture of the devoted husband. Annabelle played her part perfectly. Smiled, laughed at his jokes, thanked him for his care. Inside, she was counting down hours until she'd meet Daniel and begin building the plan that would destroy Brian before he could destroy her. I love you, Brian said as they got ready for bed. I love you too, Annabelle replied, and hated herself for how easily the lie came. But survival required lies, required playing a role, required becoming someone she'd never been before, stronger, harder, willing to do whatever it took to protect her daughter from the monster who'd created her. Tomorrow she'd meet Daniel Harper. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. Tonight she just had to survive one more night sleeping next to a man who was planning her murder. She placed both hands on her belly as Brian snored beside her. I'm going to save us, she whispered to her daughter. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to make sure you never have to be afraid of the man who gave you life, I promise. The baby kicked, strong and insistent. Annabelle took it as agreement. Chapter 4. The Trap. The coffee shop was busy enough to provide cover, but quiet enough to talk. Annabelle spotted Daniel immediately. He sat in the back corner as promised, dressed in casual clothes, reading a medical journal. When she approached, he looked up with manufactured surprise. Annabelle? Oh my God, I haven't seen you since college. His smile was warm enough to fool anyone watching, but his eyes held sharp intelligence. Daniel! What a surprise! She slid into the seat across from him, playing the delighted friend. How have you been? They kept up the charade for several minutes, voices loud enough to establish their cover story as old friends catching up. But when the server took their order and moved away, Daniel's expression shifted to something serious. Show me what you have. Annabelle pulled out her phone, keeping it angled low so only Daniel could see. She'd transferred the photographs to a secure app Brian couldn't access, the insurance policies, Jennifer Walsh's medical file, her own falsified records, everything documenting Brian's plans. Daniel studied each image with professional focus. When he finished, his jaw was tight. He really did kill Jennifer. I suspected but couldn't prove it. And now he's setting up the same scenario with you. He told me everything, admitted it like he was discussing the weather, said he'd solved a problem with Jennifer and plans to solve the problem of me the same way. Annabelle's voice was steady now. Days of terror had burned away into something harder. I need to stop him, but I don't know how. Every piece of evidence I have I obtained illegally, and Brian's already building a case that I'm mentally unstable. If I go to the police now, he'll destroy my credibility before they can investigate. Then we don't go to the police. Not yet. Daniel leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. We make him think he's won. Make him feel safe while we build a real case, one that can't be dismissed. How? Your pregnancy is how far along now? About 24 weeks. So you have roughly 4 more months. Brian will want you to get closer to full term before staging complications. Makes the insurance claim less suspicious. That gives us time. Daniel pulled out a pen and began sketching on a napkin. Here's what I'm thinking. In a few weeks, you stage another fall. This time you insist on coming to my urgent care clinic instead of the hospital where Brian has influence. We document it as a miscarriage. I control the records, so we can make it look completely believable. Brian will think the problem solved itself. No baby means no leverage over you, and your life insurance alone isn't worth the risk of murder. He'll back off. But I won't actually lose the baby. Exactly. I have a colleague, Dr. Patel, who runs a private women's clinic. After we stage the miscarriage at my urgent care, you disappear. Tell Brian you need time alone to grieve. Stay at Dr. Patel's clinic where she can monitor your real pregnancy in secret. While Brian thinks you're broken and grieving, we investigate him thoroughly. Find other women he's harmed. Build documentation that can't be dismissed. When you're ready to deliver, Dr. Patel handles it privately. Brian never knows the baby survived. Annabelle's mind raced through the implications. And then what? I can't hide forever. No, but you can gather enough evidence to destroy him publicly. Make his crime so undeniable that even his reputation and money can't protect him. Then you take everything to the authorities with documentation they can't ignore. By the time Brian realizes what you've done, he's already finished. That's incredibly risky. What if he figures it out? It's risky, but it's less risky than waiting for him to kill you. Daniel's eyes were fierce. Annabelle, Brian has been getting away with harming women for years because he's smart and careful. We need to be smarter and more careful. This plan gives you survival time and builds a real case, but I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you play the broken wife convincingly? Can you make Brian believe you're defeated while you're actually planning his destruction? Annabelle thought about Jennifer Walsh, dead because she'd loved Brian, about her daughter growing inside her, deserving protection, about the past weeks living with a man who'd calmly explained his murder plans. Yes, she said, I can do that. I'll be whatever I need to be to survive long enough to destroy him. Good, because the moment you stage that miscarriage, you're committing fully to this plan. There's no backing out. Brian will absolutely kill you if he discovers the deception. When should we do it? Give it 2 more weeks. Let Brian think everything's back to normal. Then one morning, you'll fall at home. Call his office panicking. Tell him you need to get to urgent care immediately because you're bleeding. Insist on my clinic because it's closest. I'll be ready. We'll make it look completely real. They planned every detail. How Annabelle would fall, what she'd say, how to make her panic convincing. Daniel would have Dr. Patel on standby to immediately transport Annabelle to the private clinic once Brian left. Everything timed precisely to give Brian no chance to control the narrative. One question, Annabelle said. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. This could destroy your career if anything goes wrong. Why risk everything? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Because 10 years ago, Brian filed a false sexual harassment complaint against me, claimed I acted inappropriately with a patient. It was complete fiction, but the investigation destroyed my hospital career. I was innocent, but couldn't prove it conclusively enough. I've spent a decade rebuilding my reputation and knowing that Brian got away with lying because he was better at playing the political game. Now I have a chance to prove he's been dangerous all along, that my warnings about him were right, and maybe save your life in the process. That seems worth the risk. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be sorry. Be ready, because in 2 weeks we're going to make Brian Malone think he's won. And while he's celebrating, we'll be building the case that ends him. They parted ways with a hug that looked natural, old friends promising to stay in touch. Annabelle drove home rehearsing her cover story, a chance meeting with a college friend. Pleasant conversation, nothing suspicious. Brian was waiting when she arrived. How was your friend? Good. We caught up on old times. She's married now, has kids. The lies came easier than they should have. It was nice to get out of the house. Good. You need normal activities. Take your mind off stress. He kissed her forehead. I have evening rounds at the hospital. I'll be back late. Will you be okay alone? Of course. I'll make dinner and rest. The moment he left, Annabelle went to the bathroom and flushed the pills he'd given her that morning. She'd been doing it for days, watching as the strange medication dissolved down the drain. Whatever he'd been giving her, she wouldn't take another dose. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to play the perfect wife while planning her escape. 2 weeks to make Brian feel completely secure. Then the real plan would begin. She spent those weeks being exactly what Brian needed her to be: grateful, compliant, slightly fragile, but recovering. She took the pills while he watched, then vomited them up the moment he left. She smiled and played house and counted down the days. On the morning of the planned fall, Annabelle woke early. Brian had already left for early rounds at the hospital. She was alone. Time to become an actress performing for her life. She positioned cushions at the bottom of the stairs where Brian wouldn't see them from his usual angles. Then she threw herself down the top 3 steps, hitting the cushions hard enough to bruise, but not hard enough to actually harm the baby. The impact hurt. Real pain that would make her tears authentic. She called Brian's office, making her voice shake. "Something's wrong. I fell and there's blood. I need to get to urgent care now. The one on Patterson Street is closest. Please, I'm so scared." "I'm coming home right now," Brian said. In the background, she could hear him cancelling patients. "Don't move, I'll be there in 15 minutes. He arrived in 12, finding her still crumpled at the base of the stairs, tears streaming, both hands pressed to her belly. The blood was real, though not from the fall. She'd prepared it carefully, using a method Dr. Patel had suggested over an encrypted call, realistic enough to fool even a doctor's quick examination. "Annabelle!" Brian's concern looked genuine, but underneath she caught a flash of something else. Calculation. He was evaluating whether this solved his problem naturally. "The baby. Please. We need to go now." He helped her to the car with careful gentleness. During the drive, he called ahead to what he thought was a random urgent care clinic. "My wife is pregnant and experiencing heavy bleeding after a fall. We need immediate assessment." Then Brian did something that made Annabelle's blood run cold. "Actually, which urgent care are you suggesting? Patterson Street?" His voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "I'm not familiar with that facility. Who's the attending physician?" Annabelle's heart hammered. She'd insisted on Daniel's clinic specifically. Too specifically. Brian was a doctor. He knew every medical facility in the city. Why would she want this particular urgent care unless she had a reason? "It's just the closest," she managed. "I looked it up online this morning when I started feeling off." "You felt off this morning and didn't tell me?" Brian's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "That's odd, Annabelle. You usually tell me about every little symptom." "I didn't want to worry you. I thought it was nothing." They pulled into the urgent care parking lot. Brian sat for a moment, studying her face. "You're sure about this place? We could go to Mercy Hospital. I have privileges there, better equipment." "Please. I just want to get checked now. This is closer." Annabelle let desperation show. Real desperation, because if Brian insisted on Mercy, the entire plan would collapse. After what felt like an eternity, Brian nodded. "All right, let's go." Daniel met them at the door with a wheelchair and practiced concern. But Annabelle saw his eyes flicker when he recognized Brian. 10 years of bad blood between them. If Brian remembered Daniel, this would end badly. "I'm Dr. Harper," Daniel said, his voice professional. "Let's get you examined immediately, Mrs. Malone." Brian's expression shifted slightly. "Harper. Daniel Harper." "Dr. Malone." Daniel's voice stayed neutral. "It's been a while." "It has." Brian's smile was cold. "Small world. My wife just happens to fall and insists on coming to the urgent care run by a doctor I filed a complaint against years ago. Quite a coincidence." Annabelle's stomach dropped. This was it. Brian knew. He'd figured it out. The plan was over before it began. "I don't know what you mean," she said quickly. "I've never met Dr. Harper before. I just searched for the closest urgent care." "Is that so?" Brian's voice was soft, dangerous. "Then you won't mind if I'm present for the examination? As her husband and a medical professional, I have the right to observe." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Actually, hospital policy requires private patient examinations unless the patient specifically requests otherwise. Professional ethics." professional ethics. Brian's laugh was sharp. Rich, coming from you, we both know how well you handle professional ethics. Other patients and staff were starting to notice the tension. An older nurse approached. Gentlemen, this woman is bleeding and in pain. Can we get her examined before we discuss hospital politics? Brian had no choice. Making a scene would draw too much attention. But as Daniel began wheeling Annabelle toward the examination room, Brian called out, I want to see the ultrasound images myself, all of them, not just what you decide to show me. Of course, Daniel replied smoothly. Standard practice. Inside the examination room with the door closed, Daniel worked fast. He's suspicious. This is bad. I know. Annabelle was shaking. What do we do? We stick to the plan, but we need to be perfect. One wrong move and he'll know. Daniel positioned the ultrasound machine carefully. The screen showed Maya's heartbeat, strong and healthy, but he'd rigged a second monitor, one that would display pre-recorded images of a miscarriage. This screen is what I'll show Brian. But if he demands to see the actual machine, if he gets close enough to check, he'll know I'm using fake images. Can you prevent that? I'll try. But Annabelle, if this goes wrong, if he figures out the baby's alive, you need to run. Don't go home with him. Don't get in his car. Just run. She nodded, terror making her nauseous. Daniel conducted the examination quickly, documenting everything for his records. Then he opened the door and called Brian in, his face arranged in professional sympathy. Dr. Malone, I'm very sorry. Your wife is experiencing a complete miscarriage. The pregnancy is not viable. Brian's face showed appropriate shock and grief, but his eyes were calculating, suspicious. Show me the images. Daniel turned the secondary monitor toward Brian, displaying the pre-recorded footage of an empty womb, an absent heartbeat. Brian studied it intently, then his gaze moved to the ultrasound machine itself. That's odd, Brian said quietly. The timestamp on these images shows they were recorded earlier, not just now during the examination. Annabelle's breath stopped. He'd caught the detail Daniel had missed. The plan was falling apart. The machine timestamp malfunctions sometimes, Daniel said quickly. It's an older model. The images are from today's examination. Is that so? Brian moved toward the ultrasound machine. Then you won't mind if I check the actual display screen? Daniel stepped between Brian and the machine. Dr. Malone, I understand you're upset, but this is my clinic and my equipment. If you have concerns about my medical assessment, you're welcome to seek a second opinion at another facility. The two men stood inches apart, years of hatred crackling between them. Brian was bigger, angrier. Daniel was blocking access to the truth. I want to take my wife to Mercy Hospital for confirmation, Brian said flatly. Now. That's Mrs. Malone's decision, Daniel replied. Not yours. All eyes turned to Annabelle. This was the moment. If she went with Brian, he'd discover the baby was alive. He'd kill her before she made it home. But if she refused, he'd know she was working with Daniel. He'd know everything. I'll stay here, Annabelle said, her voice steadier than she felt. Dr. Harper's assessment is sufficient. I just need rest. Brian's face darkened. Annabelle, as your husband and a physician, I'm advising you to get a second opinion. And as your wife and the patient, I'm declining. She met his eyes. I trust Dr. Harper's diagnosis. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Brian heard what she wasn't saying. She trusted Daniel over him. She'd chosen sides. I see, Brian's voice was ice. Then I'll wait in the lobby while you receive treatment. Take your time. He walked out, every line of his body radiating rage. The moment the door closed, Daniel exhaled shakily. That was too close. He knows something's wrong. Maybe not what exactly, but he's suspicious. Will the plan still work? It has to. We're committed now. Daniel helped her sit up. I'm admitting you to observation. Tonight Brian will leave eventually. The moment he does, we move you to Dr. Patel's clinic. But Annabelle, you need to understand, Brian's going to be watching. He's going to question everything. One mistake, and he'll figure out the truth. She nodded, fear and determination warring inside her. The next hours were tense. Brian stayed in the observation room, watching her like a hawk. Every time Daniel came to check her vitals, Brian questioned his methods. Every medication was scrutinized, every chart note examined. "You're being unusually thorough," Daniel commented during one visit. "My wife just lost our baby," Brian replied. "I want to make sure she's getting proper care. Surely you understand." By evening, Brian was exhausted, but stubborn. He showed no signs of leaving. Daniel pulled him aside, speaking too quietly for Annabelle to hear. Whatever he said made Brian's face twist with anger, but finally, Brian nodded. He returned to Annabelle's bedside. "I need to go home for a few hours. I have early surgeries tomorrow, but I'll be back first thing in the morning. Don't leave this facility. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good." He kissed her forehead, the gesture possessive rather than loving. "We'll get through this, Annabelle, together." The moment his car left the parking lot, Daniel moved with controlled urgency. "We have maybe 2 hours before he circles back to check on you. Dr. Patel is waiting. We need to move now." They took back hallways and service exits, moving fast. At every turn, Annabelle expected to see Brian, to hear his voice demanding to know where she was going, but they made it to the parking lot where Dr. Patel's car waited. "Get in," Dr. Patel urged. "Hurry." As they pulled away from the urgent care clinic, Annabelle looked back and saw a car that might have been Brian's turning into the parking lot. Had he come back already? Had he seen them? "Drive faster," she whispered. Dr. Patel pressed the accelerator. They made it to her private clinic without incident. But as Annabelle was helped inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that Brian knew. That despite their precautions, he'd figured out at least part of the deception. "You're safe now," Dr. Patel assured her. But Annabelle placed her hands on her belly, feeling Maya kick, and wondered if safety was even possible anymore. Brian was suspicious. Brian was watching, and if he discovered the truth before they were ready to expose him, they'd both die. The plan had worked, barely, by the thinnest margin. But they'd made it. She and Maya were hidden, and while Brian might suspect something, he didn't know the full truth yet. That would have to be enough. Chapter 5. The ghost Dr. Patel's private clinic was nothing like a hospital. The room Annabelle was given felt more like a comfortable bedroom than a medical facility. Soft lighting, actual art on the walls, a window overlooking a garden. The first place she'd felt safe since finding those files in Brian's office. "You'll stay here until delivery," Dr. Patel explained, conducting a thorough examination that showed the baby perfectly healthy despite the staged trauma. "My clinic specializes in women who need discretion, abuse victims, women escaping dangerous situations. You're not the first person I've hidden from a violent husband, and you won't be the last." "How long do I have?" "Based on your actual development, roughly 14 more weeks until full term. That gives us time to build your case while Brian thinks you're safely grieving and broken." Annabelle's double life began that night. In one reality, she met Brian twice a week at a coffee shop near his hospital. She played the devastated wife recovering from miscarriage, cried on cue, talked about eventually trying again, let him comfort her, while inside she screamed. Brian was gentle during those meetings, almost loving. The threat was gone. No baby meant no insurance payout worth risking murder for. He could afford to be kind, now that she was no longer valuable dead. "I'm proud of how you're handling this," he said during one coffee date. "So many women fall apart after pregnancy loss. But you're staying strong." "I have you," Annabelle replied, forcing warmth into her voice. "That makes everything easier." In her other reality, the real one, Annabelle lived at Dr. Patel's clinic and built the case that would destroy Brian. Daniel visited daily, bringing information about other victims. "I found Jennifer Walsh's sister," Daniel said during one visit. "Amanda. She's been trying to get Jennifer's death investigated for months. No one would listen. But when I told her about you and showed her Jennifer's medical records, she broke down. She always knew something was wrong." Amanda visited the clinic days later, young, grief-stricken, carrying a folder that made Annabelle's blood run cold. Jennifer kept a diary, Amanda said, hands shaking as she opened it. She wrote about her appointments with Brian, how he kept finding complications that didn't match what she was feeling, how he seemed almost disappointed when she had good days. Look at this entry from the week before she died. Annabelle read Jennifer's neat handwriting. Something's wrong with Dr. Malone's care. The medications make me feel worse, not better, but when I asked questions he got angry, said I was being difficult. I'm scared to keep seeing him, but more scared to switch doctors this late. What if I'm just being paranoid? She wasn't paranoid, Annabelle said softly. Brian was killing her, just like he planned to kill me. Will you help me prove it? Amanda's voice was fierce. Will you help me make sure people know Jennifer didn't die from complications, that she was murdered? Yes, I promise you, we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what Brian Malone is. Over the following weeks, Daniel found more victims. Helen, who'd lost her fertility under Brian's care after an emergency surgery that Helen swore wasn't necessary. Lisa, whose baby died at 30 weeks from complications Brian had documented but Lisa had never experienced. Two other women with similar stories of suddenly appearing complications and devastating outcomes. Every woman had signed NDAS. Every woman had taken hospital settlements rather than fight. Every woman carried guilt about not pushing harder for investigations. We were all scared, Helen said during a meeting at the clinic. Brian's respected. We're just patients. Who would believe us over him? Everyone will believe us once we present the pattern, Annabelle replied. One victim might be dismissed. 5 victims with identical stories. That's evidence of a system. Her pregnancy progressed in secret. Dr. Patel monitored everything carefully. The baby was healthy, active, completely unaware that her biological father had tried to kill her before she was born. Annabelle named her Maya during a quiet moment alone, feeling her daughter kick. Maya means illusion, she whispered. Because as far as your father knows, you don't exist. You're my secret weapon. The weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Twice weekly performances for Brian where Annabelle played broken and defeated. The rest of her time spent gathering evidence, interviewing victims, building documentation that would be undeniable. Daniel coordinated everything. He found medical experts willing to review Brian's files and testify that the pattern of complications across multiple patients suggested deliberate harm rather than bad luck. He located a lawyer named Sharon Hayes, who specialized in medical malpractice and had a reputation for taking down doctors who thought they were untouchable. Sharon visited the clinic to review their evidence. She was sharp-eyed and skeptical, examining every document with the focus of someone who'd seen too many cases fall apart over technicalities. This is good, Sharon said finally. Really good. 5 victims with identical patterns. Jennifer Walsh's diary showing she suspected something. Your recording of Brian's confession. Medical experts ready to testify. We can build a case that might actually stick. Might. Annabelle's heart sank. Brian has money and reputation. His lawyers will be excellent. They'll attack your credibility, claim you're a vindictive ex-wife, try to suppress the recording as illegally obtained. This won't be easy, but it's winnable, especially if we can find more victims. The more women who come forward, the harder it is for Brian to claim they're all lying. At 38 weeks, Annabelle went into labor. Dr. Patel delivered Maya in the clinic's small birthing room. No complications, no emergencies, just a healthy baby girl entering the world with a cry that sounded like victory. She's perfect, Dr. Patel said, placing the baby on Annabelle's chest. Annabelle held her daughter and wept. Relief and joy and overwhelming love for this tiny person who'd survived against impossible odds. Your father wanted you dead, but look at you. Alive, beautiful, safe. Maya had Annabelle's eyes and a full head of dark hair. She was alert, curious, studying her mother's face with surprising focus. We did it, Annabelle whispered. We beat him. He doesn't even know you exist. Daniel visited that evening, bringing supplies and a gentle smile. She's beautiful. What's her name? Maya. It means illusion. That's perfect. Brian's greatest mistake wrapped up in one tiny person. Daniel touched Maya's small hand carefully. Are you ready for the next phase? What next phase? Making Brian know he lost. Not from police, not from lawyers, from you. Daniel's eyes were fierce. We have enough evidence now. We can go to authorities and let them handle it. Or we can make this personal first. Let Brian see that you survived, that you outsmarted him, that his plans failed completely. Then we destroy him legally. Your choice. Annabelle looked at her daughter, then back at Daniel. I want him to know. I want to see his face when he realizes I beat him. Then we set up the meeting, somewhere public, somewhere he can't hurt you, and you tell him exactly how thoroughly he lost. Daniel smiled. Think you can handle that? After everything I've survived? Absolutely. They planned it carefully. A restaurant Brian liked, popular with his colleagues. Dinner on Saturday night. Annabelle would text him that she was ready to talk about moving forward, maybe trying again for a baby someday. He'd come expecting reconciliation. He'd get revelation instead. The night before the meeting, Annabelle couldn't sleep. Maya lay in her bassinet, peaceful and perfect. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Brian would learn that his wife and daughter were both alive, that his perfect murder plan had failed completely. Tomorrow, he learns he lost, Annabelle whispered to sleeping Maya. And then we make sure he pays for every woman he hurt, every life he destroyed. Your existence is the proof he's not as smart as he thinks. You're my victory. Saturday arrived. Annabelle left Maya with Dr. Patel, trusting her daughter's safety to the woman who'd protected them both for months. She dressed carefully, not like a defeated wife, but like someone who'd already won. The text to Brian was simple. I'm ready to talk about us. Dinner tonight? Your favorite restaurant? Say 7? His response came within minutes. I'd love that. I've missed you. Daniel would be at the restaurant first, seated across the room. Ruth from Mercy Hospital would be there too, pretending to dine alone. Witnesses who knew the truth, ready to intervene if needed. Annabelle arrived early, chose a central table where everyone could see. She ordered water and waited. Brian walked in looking confident, successful, happy. He'd survived the scandal of his wife's miscarriage. Life was back to normal. When he spotted Annabelle, his smile was genuine. He thought he'd won. He had no idea the bomb she was about to drop would destroy everything he'd built. Annabelle. He kissed her cheek before sitting. You look wonderful. I'm so glad you're ready to move forward. I am. She smiled. Completely ready to move forward. In fact, there's something I need to tell you. Of course, anything. I didn't lose the pregnancy. Brian's smile froze. What? The miscarriage. It was fake. Daniel Harper helped me stage it. I've been hiding for months at a private clinic. I delivered a healthy baby girl 3 weeks ago. Her name is Maya. She's beautiful. And she's somewhere you'll never find her. The color drained from Brian's face. Around them, other diners continued their meals, unaware that one conversation was ending a man's entire world. You're lying, Brian said, but his voice shook. I'm not. And that's not all I need to tell you. Annabelle leaned forward, her voice steady and cold. I know about Jennifer Walsh, about Helen and Lisa and the other women you harmed. I have Jennifer's diary where she wrote about fearing you. I have medical experts who reviewed your files and found patterns of deliberate harm. I have recordings of your confession, and I have 5 women ready to testify about what you did to them. Brian's hands gripped the edge of the table. You have nothing that will hold up in court. You broke into my office, recorded me illegally, lied to authorities about a miscarriage. They'll destroy your credibility. Maybe, but they'll have to explain why 5 different women tell identical stories, why Jennifer Walsh's diary matches my experience, why medical experts say your treatment patterns are criminally negligent. Annabelle's smile was sharp. You thought you were untouchable. You were wrong. Brian lunged across the table. Daniel appeared instantly, grabbing Brian's arm before he could reach Annabelle. Other diners gasped. Restaurant staff moved toward them. Don't touch her, Daniel said quietly. Security's calling the police right now. Brian stared at Annabelle with pure hatred. I should have killed you when I had the chance. Yes, you should have, but you underestimated me. Thought I was too weak and stupid to fight back. That was your fatal mistake. Annabelle stood, Daniel's hand steady on her shoulder. Goodbye, Brian. Enjoy your arrest. I'll see you in court. She walked out with Daniel beside her, leaving Brian surrounded by shocked diners and approaching security. Behind them, she heard him shouting her name, making threats that would only add to his charges. Outside, Annabelle's hands shook with adrenaline. He's going to come after me. No, he's not, because the moment we walked out that door, Sharon Hayes delivered all our evidence to the police. They're issuing a warrant for his arrest right now. By morning, Brian Malone will be in custody facing murder charges. Annabelle looked up at the evening sky. Free. For the first time in months, actually free. Brian knew she'd beaten him. And now everyone else would know too. Let's go see Maya, she said. I want to hold my daughter and tell her that her mother protected her from the monster who wanted them both dead. They drove back to the clinic. Annabelle lifted Maya from her bassinet and held her close. The baby stirred but didn't wake, peaceful and safe. It's over, Annabelle whispered. You're safe. I made sure of it. But she knew it wasn't quite over. The legal battle was just beginning. Brian would fight. He'd use his money and reputation to attack her credibility. The trial would be brutal. She was ready. She'd survived attempted murder. She could survive a courtroom for Maya, for Jennifer, for every woman Brian had hurt. She would make sure Brian Malone spent the rest of his miserable life in prison. Chapter 7. The War. Brian's arrest made every news channel within hours. Annabelle watched from Dr. Patel's clinic as footage showed Brian in handcuffs, rage twisting his features as police led him from the restaurant. The charming doctor persona had shattered completely, leaving only the monster underneath. Dr. Brian Malone, prominent obstetrician, arrested on suspicion of murder and multiple counts of medical malpractice, the news anchor reported. Sources say the investigation involves several women who died or were seriously injured under his care. The phone calls started immediately. Detectives wanting statements, prosecutors building their case, reporters seeking interviews. Annabelle ignored them all that first night, holding Maya close, letting reality sink in. Sharon Hayes called the next morning. Mrs. Malone, we need to talk strategy. Brian's family has hired a New York legal team. Big firm, expensive. They're already spinning this as a vindictive wife, framing an innocent doctor. Can they win? They'll try, but we have something they don't. Multiple victims with consistent stories, medical evidence, and your recording of Brian's confession. Still, you need to prepare yourself. They're going to attack you personally, dig into every aspect of your life, make you look unstable, vindictive, capable of fabricating evidence. Detective Torres, assigned to the case, was more blunt. Mrs. Malone, Brian's lawyers are going to tear you apart on that witness stand. They'll claim pregnancy hormones made you delusional. That finding out about his affair drove you to this elaborate revenge scheme, that you faked a miscarriage and hid a baby just to frame him. It's going to be ugly. I can handle ugly. I've been living with ugly for months. Can you handle watching him walk free if a jury believes his lawyers over you? The possibility terrified her. But Annabelle met Torres's eyes steadily. If that happens, I'll make sure he's never safe again. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure everyone knows what he is. But it won't happen, because we have the truth. Over the following weeks, Brian's defense team built their counter-narrative. They leaked carefully selected details to sympathetic media. Stories about Annabelle discovering Brian's affair with Rachel and becoming obsessed with revenge. Claims that she'd always been emotionally unstable. Suggestions that she'd orchestrated an elaborate frame-up. Headlines appeared questioning Annabelle's credibility. Opinion pieces wondered if a wronged wife could be trusted. The narrative was shifting from doctor accused of murder to doctor possibly framed by vindictive spouse. Then Amanda Walsh did something that changed everything. During a preliminary hearing, while Brian's lawyers were arguing that the evidence was circumstantial and the witnesses unreliable, Amanda stood up in the courtroom gallery. "He murdered my sister," she shouted. "Jennifer Walsh died because Dr. Malone wanted her dead, and you're letting him claim he's the victim." The judge ordered her removed. Security moved toward Amanda, but as they escorted her out, she shouted one more thing that made everyone freeze. "Jennifer recorded her appointments. The files are in her storage unit. She knew something was wrong and she documented everything." The courtroom erupted. Brian's face went pale. His lawyers tried to claim Amanda was lying, desperate to blame someone for her sister's tragic death. But Amanda had the storage unit key. She'd had it all along, kept as a memento of Jennifer. Inside that unit, investigators found Jennifer's personal belongings, including a box of audio recordings. Jennifer had secretly recorded her appointments with Brian, dozens of files captured on her phone. Most were innocuous medical discussions, but several showed Brian's cold detachment when Jennifer expressed concerns, his dismissive responses to her questions, his insistence that she trust his judgment over her own bodily experiences. One recording from the week before Jennifer died was particularly damning. Jennifer asked why she needed specific medications when she didn't feel the symptoms they were supposed to treat. Brian's response was chilling. "Jennifer, I'm the doctor. I'm telling you these complications are present whether you feel them or not. If you can't trust my medical judgment, perhaps you should find another obstetrician. Though I warn you, switching care this late in pregnancy is dangerous." The implied threat was clear. Trust him or risk your baby by finding new care too late. Jennifer had stayed, trusting the man who would kill her days later. The prosecution's case strengthened dramatically. They now had recordings showing Brian's manipulation. Combined with Annabelle's evidence, Helen and Lisa's testimony, and medical experts explaining the pattern, the case became much harder to dismiss as vindictive fabrication. Brian's lawyers shifted strategy. They offered a plea deal, manslaughter instead of murder, surrender his medical license, serve time but not life in prison. Sharon called Annabelle with the offer. "They're suggesting 12 to 15 years. He'd be out in his 50s, potentially. The prosecution is considering taking it. It's a guaranteed conviction versus the risk of trial." "No." Annabelle's voice was ice. "I want the trial. I want him on that stand trying to explain how 5 different women all experienced the same pattern of abuse. I want a jury to hear his voice admitting he killed Jennifer. I want everyone to know exactly what Brian Malone is. A trial is risky. If he's acquitted, he won't be, because we're not going to let his lawyers control the narrative anymore." Annabelle had spent months planning this moment. "We go public, all 5 women. We hold a press conference and tell our stories. Let people hear directly from us why Brian Malone is dangerous. Make it impossible for a jury to dismiss us as vindictive liars." Sharon was quiet for a moment. "That's bold. It could backfire if his lawyers use it to claim we're trying to poison the jury pool. Or it could work. Let people see us as real women, not abstract victims. Let them understand the pattern before the trial even starts." Annabelle looked at Maya, sleeping peacefully. "I'm done hiding. I'm done letting Brian's lawyers paint me as crazy. We fought too hard to let him walk on a plea deal." The press conference happened the following week. 6 women stood together at a podium. Annabelle, Amanda Walsh speaking for her dead sister, Helen, Lisa, and 2 other victims who'd found courage to break their NDAs after seeing the news coverage. Annabelle spoke first. "Brian Malone tried to murder me for insurance money. He told me he'd already killed his mistress Jennifer Walsh. When I exposed him, he threatened to finish what he'd started. I'm standing here today because I fought back, because other women fought with me, because we refused to let him keep hurting people." One by one, the women told their stories. Helen described losing her fertility. Lisa talked about her unnecessary surgery. Amanda read from Jennifer's diary, her voice breaking but determined. The press conference was powerful, raw, undeniable. Footage played on every news channel. Social media exploded with support. The narrative shifted again. Now Brian looked like exactly what he was, a predator who'd harmed multiple women over years. His lawyers tried damage control, but the united front of 6 women was too strong to dismiss as fabrication. The trial date was set. Both sides began final preparations. Torres visited Annabelle one last time before proceedings began. "You know he's going to make threats from the defense table. He's going to try to intimidate you into breaking down. Can you handle being in the same room with him while his lawyers call you a liar?" Annabelle thought about the months she'd spent hiding, about delivering Maya in secret, about every performance she'd given pretending to be defeated while planning Brian's destruction. "I've been handling Brian Malone's intimidation for almost a year," she said. "I can handle a few more weeks." "Good, because this trial is going to define the rest of your life. Win, and you're free. Lose, and you spend forever looking over your shoulder waiting for Brian to get out and finish what he started. Then I guess we'd better win." The night before the trial, Annabelle lay awake beside Maya's bassinet. Her daughter slept peacefully, unaware that tomorrow would begin the fight for their future. "Tomorrow we make sure your father pays for what he did," Annabelle whispered. "Tomorrow I tell the world exactly what kind of monster he is, and I'm not going to stop until he's locked away where he can never hurt anyone again." Maya stirred, and Annabelle held her daughter close. Whatever happened in that courtroom, she'd already won the most important battle. She'd survived. She'd protected her child. She'd built a case that couldn't be ignored. Brian Malone was about to learn that underestimating a mother's love was the biggest mistake of his life. Chapter 8. The Testimony. The courtroom was packed with spectators, media, and medical professionals watching one of their own face justice. Annabelle sat behind the prosecution table, surrounded by the women Brian had harmed. They'd agreed to attend every day of trial, a visible reminder that Brian's crimes weren't isolated incidents, but a pattern of destruction spanning years. 6 women, united against one man. Brian entered wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. He'd lost weight during his months in custody, looked older, but his eyes still held that calculating coldness. When his gaze found Annabelle across the courtroom, the hatred was pure and absolute. Sharon Hayes opened with devastating simplicity. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're going to hear a story about a man who used his medical degree as a weapon. Dr. Brian Malone didn't save lives, he destroyed them. Over 15 years he harmed at least 6 women we know about, killing one and attempting to kill another. He falsified medical records. He poisoned his pregnant wife. He threatened to finish murdering her even from jail. This isn't about medical complications. This is about premeditated murder, and we're going to prove it beyond any doubt." Brian's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Whitmore, painted a different picture. "What you're really going to hear is a story about a doctor who had an affair, which was wrong but not criminal, and a wife who discovered that affair and decided to destroy him. Ms. Wallace orchestrated an elaborate revenge scheme, faking a miscarriage, hiding a pregnancy, coordinating with other disgruntled patients to create a false pattern of abuse. Dr. Malone made mistakes in his marriage, but he's not a murderer. He's a scapegoat for women looking to blame someone for tragic but natural complications." The prosecution's case began with Amanda Walsh. She took the stand, holding Jennifer's photograph, tears already streaming. "My sister trusted Dr. Malone completely. She wrote in her diary about feeling scared during his appointments, about suspecting something was wrong with his care. 2 days before she died, she recorded an appointment where she asked why she needed medications for symptoms she wasn't experiencing. Dr. Malone told her to trust him or find another doctor. She stayed because she was afraid. 3 days later, she was dead." Whitmore's cross-examination was brutal. "Ms. Walsh, isn't it true your sister had a history of anxiety, that she often worried excessively about her health? She was concerned about her pregnancy? Yes, any mother would be. And isn't it possible she misinterpreted routine medical care through the lens of that anxiety, that doctor? Malone wasn't threatening her, but simply trying to ensure she followed proper medical protocols?" "No. Jennifer knew something was wrong. Her diary proves it. Or it proves she was an anxious woman catastrophizing normal medical care. Sadly, she experienced tragic complications. That doesn't mean Dr. Malone murdered her. Helen testified next, describing her destroyed fertility. Lisa talked about her unnecessary surgery. Each woman told her story clearly, refusing to let Whitmore shake them with suggestions that they were bitter about medical outcomes they didn't understand. But the defense had their own medical experts. Doctors who claimed Brian's treatment decisions had been within acceptable standards, that complications happen in obstetrics, that calling it murder was hysterical overreach. The jury listened to both sides, faces carefully neutral, impossible to read. Then Sharon played the recording. Annabelle's voice asking Brian to explain his plans. Brian's calm response admitting he'd killed Jennifer Walsh. His detailed description of creating false medical records and administering medications to cause hemorrhaging. His explanation of planning the same for Annabelle. The courtroom was silent as Brian's voice filled the space, confessing to murder with the casualness of someone discussing the weather. When it ended, several jurors looked shaken. Others stared at Brian with expressions that had shifted from neutral to disgusted. Whitmore objected immediately. "Your Honor, this recording was obtained through entrapment. Ms. Wallace deliberately manipulated her husband into making statements he wouldn't have made otherwise." Mrs. Malone was attempting to understand whether her husband was planning to kill her, Sharon countered. "That's not entrapment, that's survival. The recording is authentic, unedited, and devastatingly clear. The jury deserves to hear Dr. Malone's own words." The judge allowed it. The recording stayed in evidence. Brian's face had gone pale. That recording was the one thing his lawyers couldn't explain away. His own voice, his own admission, undeniable. On the fourth day of trial, Annabelle took the stand. She'd prepared for this moment for months. Rehearsed with Sharon until every answer was perfect, but nothing fully prepared her for sitting feet from Brian while his lawyers tried to destroy her. Sharon guided her through the story gently, finding the files. Brian's confession, the fall on the stairs where he'd let her bleed, the fake miscarriage and hidden pregnancy, every detail documented and clear. "And why did you go to such lengths instead of simply going to police immediately?" Sharon asked. "Because I knew no one would believe me without proof. Brian is respected, successful, charming. I was his dependent wife with no career and no income. He'd already told me he'd created documentation showing I was mentally unstable. If I'd gone to police with just my word, he would have destroyed my credibility before any real investigation began. So I made him think I was defeated while I built a case that couldn't be dismissed. I did what I had to do to survive long enough to protect my daughter and expose him." No further questions. Whitmore stood for cross-examination with a predatory smile. "Mrs. Malone, isn't it true you discovered your husband was having an affair with a woman named Rachel?" "I learned about Rachel after discovering his plans to kill me. The affair was secondary to the murder plot. Or discovering the affair drove you to elaborate revenge. You faked a miscarriage to manipulate your husband emotionally and legally. You hid a pregnancy to create a dramatic revelation. You coordinated with other patients who'd signed settlements, encouraging them to break legal agreements, all to destroy a man who'd hurt your feelings by being unfaithful. No, I survived a man who told me he'd murdered his mistress and planned to murder me for insurance money. You claim to have a recording of that confession, yet you made that recording secretly in your home while deliberately asking leading questions designed to elicit incriminating responses. That's textbook entrapment. That's me trying to gather proof that would protect my life." Whitmore pulled out documents. "Mrs. Malone, you claim to be mentally stable. Yet according to these records, you were diagnosed with borderline personality disorder 5 years ago. A condition characterized by emotional instability, vindictive behavior, and elaborate manipulation schemes." Annabelle's blood ran cold. Those records were fake. She'd seen a therapist for grief counseling after her mother died, nothing more. But Brian had created false records, just like he'd created false pregnancy complications. "Those records are forgeries," she said firmly. My actual therapist, Dr. Martinez, has already provided sworn testimony that I was never diagnosed with any personality disorder. Brian created those documents the same way he created fake medical records for me and Jennifer Walsh. Or you're lying now because those records destroy your credibility. Or you're desperate because the truth destroys your client's defense. The back and forth continued for hours. Whitmore attacked from every angle, but Annabelle held firm. She didn't cry, didn't show anger, just answered clearly and let the jury see that she was completely sane, completely credible, and completely telling the truth. When she finally stepped down, Sharon squeezed her hand. You were perfect. The jury believed you. But the defense wasn't finished. They brought Brian's colleagues to testify about his excellent reputation. They brought character witnesses who painted him as devoted and ethical. They tried to bury the horror of his confession under a mountain of professional accomplishment. Then came the moment that would define the trial. During a recess, Annabelle watched through the courtroom window as Brian argued with his legal team in the hallway. Whitmore was shaking his head emphatically. Another lawyer had his hand on Brian's arm, clearly trying to persuade him of something. Brian's face was red with anger. When court resumed, Whitmore approached the bench looking uncomfortable. Your Honor, my client is insisting on testifying despite our strong legal advice against it. We've explained the risks. We've outlined how the prosecution will use his testimony against him, but Dr. Malone believes he can explain the context of the recording and his actions in a way that will exonerate him. Against our professional recommendation, he's exercising his right to take the stand. Judge Rothman looked at Brian directly. Dr. Malone, your attorneys are advising you not to testify. Do you understand that? I do, Your Honor. And you understand that if you take the stand, the prosecution will cross-examine you about every aspect of this case? That anything you say can and will be used against you? I understand completely. Brian's voice was confident, arrogant. But these women have spent days lying about me. I deserve the chance to tell the truth, to explain what really happened. The jury deserves to hear my side directly, not filtered through my lawyers. Whitmore closed his eyes briefly, the expression of a man watching his client commit legal suicide. Very well, Judge Rothman said. The defense may call Dr. Malone to testify. Brian took the stand with the bearing of someone who believed his intelligence would carry the day. He'd spent his entire career convincing people to trust him. Surely a jury would be no different. Whitmore conducted a careful direct examination, trying to minimize damage. Dr. Malone, can you explain your relationship with Jennifer Walsh? We had an affair. I'm not proud of it, but it happened. Jennifer was a pharmaceutical representative. We connected at a conference. The relationship was brief, and I ended it when I realized it was jeopardizing my marriage. And when Jennifer died during childbirth, how did that affect you? I was devastated. She was my patient. I tried everything to save her, but sometimes complications are simply unavoidable. Her death haunts me still. Sharon's cross-examination was surgical. Dr. Malone, you just testified that you tried everything to save Jennifer Walsh. Yet according to hospital records, there was a 7-minute delay between when her hemorrhaging became critical and when you called for emergency assistance. 7 minutes where you documented her condition on your tablet instead of calling for help. Why? I was assessing the situation to determine the best intervention. For 7 minutes, while your patient bled to death? I made a judgment call. In retrospect, perhaps I should have called sooner, but that doesn't make me a murderer. Sharon played the recording again, Brian's own voice describing how he'd deliberately waited to call for help, how he'd planned Jennifer's death, how he'd viewed her murder as solving a problem. That's you, isn't it, Dr. Malone? Your voice confessing to deliberately letting Jennifer Walsh die? Brian's composure cracked slightly. That recording was taken out of context. My wife was asking me hypothetical questions and I was explaining medical scenarios. There's nothing hypothetical about you saying, I created medical documentation showing she had severe preeclampsia, or I waited just long enough before calling for help that the outcome was inevitable. Those are statements of fact. Your confession to murder. I was manipulated into saying things I didn't mean. You were caught admitting the truth, and now you're lying to save yourself. Sharon walked Brian through every damning statement on the recording, every admission, every cold calculation. Each time Brian tried to reframe it as hypothetical or misunderstood, Sharon played the audio again, letting his own words condemn him. Dr. Malone, you told your wife, and I quote, Jennifer was going to ruin everything I'd built, so I made sure the problem resolved itself. What did you mean by that? I meant that her death, tragic as it was, removed the complication of the affair from my life. Removed the complication by murdering her? No, by the unfortunate medical outcome. The outcome you caused by waiting 7 minutes to call for help. I made a medical judgment. You made a choice to let a woman die because she was inconvenient. That's not medical judgment. That's murder. The cross-examination continued for 2 brutal days. Sharon dismantled every explanation Brian offered, highlighted every contradiction, made him explain his voice on the recording saying things that couldn't be misunderstood or taken out of context. By the 2nd day, Brian's calm facade had shattered completely. He became defensive, argumentative, showing the arrogance and rage that lurked beneath his charm. Dr. Malone, why did you take out multiple life insurance policies worth over $6 million on your wife? Financial planning for our family? Or planning to collect millions when you successfully murdered her? That's a grotesque mischaracterization. Is it? You just finished explaining how Jennifer's death removed a complication. Were you planning to remove another complication the same way and profit from it? I would never harm my wife, except you told her you were going to kill her. On that recording, in your own voice. Brian lunged forward in his seat, rage overwhelming control. She manipulated me. She's a vindictive liar who couldn't handle her husband having an affair. This entire case is revenge. Or it's justice for the women you murdered and tried to murder. The jury watched Brian disintegrate on the stand, watched his mask slip to reveal the narcissist underneath, watched him blame everyone but himself for the documented evidence of his crimes. When Sharon finished, Whitmore had no redirect. There was nothing he could rehabilitate. Brian had done exactly what his lawyers warned against, revealed his true nature under pressure. As Brian left the stand, Annabelle saw him glare at his legal team with pure hatred. They'd tried to save him from himself. He'd refused. And now they all knew the case was lost. Closing arguments were powerful on both sides. Whitmore did his best to salvage the disaster of Brian's testimony, arguing the recording was still taken out of context despite the clarity of Brian's words. Sharon argued that the jury had now seen and heard Brian directly, could evaluate his credibility themselves, and should trust their own judgment about whether this was a man falsely accused or a killer trying to escape consequences. Dr. Malone wants you to believe that 6 women are all lying, Sharon said. That his wife faked a miscarriage and hid a baby for revenge. That Jennifer Walsh's diary and recordings are misinterpretations. That his own confession was taken out of context. But you heard him testify. You watched him struggle to explain his own words. You saw him become angry and defensive when confronted with the truth. Trust what you saw and heard. Brian Malone is exactly what the evidence shows him to be. A killer who needs to be stopped. The jury deliberated for 4 days. 4 days where Annabelle barely ate or slept. Where she held Maya and prayed that 12 strangers had seen the truth. Where she prepared herself for the possibility that Brian might walk free and she'd spend the rest of her life running. On the 4th day, the call came. Verdict reached. They filed back into the courtroom, 6 women on one side, Brian and his lawyers on the other. The jury foreman stood. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Jennifer Walsh, we find the defendant guilty. Annabelle's breath caught. Guilty, they believed her. On the charge of attempted murder of Annabelle Malone, we find the defendant guilty. On multiple charges of medical fraud and falsification of records, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The words kept coming. Brian's face went white. His lawyers showed no surprise. They'd known this was coming the moment Brian insisted on testifying. As bailiffs moved to take Brian into custody, he turned and stared at Annabel. "This isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll get out. And when I do, you're dead. You and that bastard child." The judge's gavel cracked down. "Mr. Malone, I'm adding charges of witness intimidation. Officers, remove him." They dragged Brian from the courtroom while he continued shouting threats. His voice faded down the hallway, promising violence even in defeat. Annabel sat frozen, unable to process that it was over, that they'd won. Amanda hugged her fiercely. "Jennifer can rest now." Helen was crying. "He's finally going to pay." Sharon squeezed Annabel's shoulder. "You did it." And Brian destroyed himself. His ego wouldn't let him stay quiet. That testimony convicted him more thoroughly than anything else could have. That night, back at Dr. Patel's clinic, Annabel held Maya and let herself believe it was real. Brian had been convicted. He was going to prison. The fight wasn't completely over. Sentencing still waited. Brian's threats still echoed, but they'd won the most important battle. "Your father is going to prison," Annabel whispered to Maya. He insisted on testifying even though it would destroy him. His arrogance was his downfall. "We're safe, baby. Finally safe." Maya cooed and grabbed at her mother's hair, innocent and perfect. Annabel closed her eyes and for the first time in almost a year, let herself feel hope. Chapter 9. The Sentence. Sentencing day arrived under grey skies that matched the weight in Annabel's chest. Brian had been convicted, but his lawyers were already filing appeals, claiming jury bias, improper evidence admission, technical errors. The conviction felt fragile, like it could be overturned with the right legal argument and enough money. But today would determine how long Brian stayed behind bars, and whether Annabel would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder or could finally breathe free. The courtroom filled with the same crowd as trial, media, spectators, medical professionals curious to see their colleague sentenced, and the 6 women Brian had harmed, dressed in solidarity, ready to speak. Brian entered in prison orange, no longer allowed the dignity of his own clothes. He looked thinner, older, diminished. But when his eyes found Annabel, the hatred burned as fierce as ever. Imprisonment hadn't softened him. It had concentrated his rage into something purer and more dangerous. Judge Rothman reviewed pre-sentencing reports. Brian's lawyers argued for leniency. No prior criminal history. A career spent helping women through dangerous pregnancies. Tragic mistakes rather than malicious intent. They painted him as a flawed man who deserved mercy. The prosecution argued for maximum sentences. A pattern of harm spanning 15 years, multiple victims, premeditated murder, zero remorse. They presented Brian as exactly what he was, a predator who needed to be locked away permanently. "Victim impact statements," Judge Rothman announced. "Who wishes to speak?" Amanda stood first, Jennifer's photograph clutched in trembling hands. "My sister was 28 years old when Dr. Malone murdered her. She had dreams, plans, a future. He took all of that because she was inconvenient, because his career mattered more than her life. No sentence can bring Jennifer back, but prison is the bare minimum he deserves for stealing her future." Helen described her destroyed fertility, voice breaking. "I'll never be a mother because Dr. Malone was too arrogant to admit his mistakes. He destroyed my body to protect his reputation. Every day, I live with what he took from me." Lisa talked about her lost baby. Rachel, Brian's former girlfriend, spoke about the terror of realizing she'd been dating a killer. Each woman added weight to the mountain of harm Brian had caused. Then Annabel stood, Maya in her arms. She'd brought her daughter deliberately, wanting the judge to see exactly what Brian had tried to destroy. "Your Honor, Brian Malone is this child's biological father. He told me he loved our daughter, but he planned to kill her mother for insurance money. He poisoned me with medications designed to cause complications. When I discovered his plans, he pushed me downstairs and watched me bleed, deciding whether to let me die. Even after conviction, he's threatened to hunt us down when he's released. She looked at Brian directly. This man has shown no remorse, no accountability, no recognition that he destroyed lives. He still believes he did nothing wrong. That makes him dangerous not just to me, but to any woman who might cross his path if he's ever released. I'm asking you to impose the maximum sentence. Keep him locked away until he's too old and broken to hurt anyone. Judge Rothman listened to every statement without expression. When the last victim sat down, she turned to Brian. "Mr. Malone, do you wish to make a statement?" His lawyers advised against it, but Brian stood anyway. "Your Honor, I maintain my innocence. I'm a doctor who dedicated my career to helping women through dangerous pregnancies. I made difficult decisions in complicated cases. That doesn't make me a murderer. I'm being persecuted for an affair and blamed for tragic medical outcomes by women looking for someone to sue. I request leniency and the opportunity to appeal this wrongful conviction." The audacity of it stole Annabelle's breath. Even now, even after everything, Brian couldn't admit he'd done anything wrong. Judge Rothman's expression hardened. "Mr. Malone, I've presided over criminal cases for 20 years. I've heard many defendants claim innocence. But your case is particularly disturbing because you continue to show no awareness of the harm you've caused. The jury heard your recorded confession. They heard 6 women describe identical patterns of abuse. They convicted you because the evidence was overwhelming, yet you stand before me claiming persecution." Brian's jaw tightened. "For the first-degree murder of Jennifer Walsh, I sentence you to life in prison with possibility of parole after 30 years. For the attempted murder of Annabelle Malone, 25 years to run consecutively. For medical fraud and falsification of records, 10 years consecutive. Total minimum sentence before parole eligibility, 65 years. The courtroom erupted. Brian would be 92 years old before he could even request parole. "Additionally," Judge Rothman continued, her voice cutting through the noise, "I'm issuing a permanent no-contact order. You are never to communicate with Mrs. Malone or her daughter through any means. No letters, no phone calls, no third-party messages. Violation will result in additional charges. Your medical license is permanently revoked. You will never practice medicine again. You will never have power over vulnerable women again." Brian exploded. "This is wrong! I'm innocent! Annabelle, this is your fault, all of it! You could have kept quiet! You could have let me—" "Bailiffs, remove him," Judge Rothman ordered. They had to physically drag Brian from the courtroom. He screamed the entire way, making threats, claiming injustice, promising revenge if he ever got free. His voice echoed down the hallway, growing fainter but still promising violence. When silence finally fell, Annabelle realized she was crying, not from fear or sadness, but from overwhelming relief. 65 years, Brian would die in prison. He'd never touch her or Maya, never hurt another woman. "You're free," Amanda whispered, hugging her. "We all are." Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Annabelle made a brief statement. "Brian Malone used his position as a doctor to harm vulnerable women for over 15 years. Today, justice was served. I hope this verdict brings some peace to his victims and prevents other doctors from thinking they can abuse their power without consequences." Maya started fussing. Annabelle excused herself from the cameras, needing to feed her daughter and process what had just happened. Daniel Harper waited by his car, having attended the sentencing to support her. "How are you feeling?" "Like I can finally breathe." Annabelle shifted Maya to her other arm. "For the first time in a year, I don't feel afraid." "Good, because you don't have to be afraid anymore. Brian's going to die in prison. His appeals will fail. His family can't buy him out of this." Daniel smiled. "You won, Annabelle. Completely." That night, Annabelle lay in her bed at Dr. Patel's clinic, Maya sleeping beside her in the bassinet. She thought about the terrified woman who'd discovered those files in Brian's office, the woman who'd fallen on the stairs and been offered a choice between silence and death. That woman had chosen to fight, had survived, had built a case that destroyed her abuser completely. "We did it," Annabelle whispered to sleeping Maya. "Your father's locked away forever. You'll never know his cruelty. You'll only know that your mother loved you enough to risk everything to keep you safe." She closed her eyes and slept deeply, peacefully, for the first time in almost a year. The nightmare was over, the monster was caged, and Annabelle was finally completely free. Chapter 10. The Empire. 6 months after Brian's sentencing, Annabelle stood in a sunlit room preparing for a wedding. Her wedding. To Daniel Harper. The man who'd helped save her life and had become so much more over the months since Brian's conviction. "You look beautiful," Amanda said, adjusting the simple white dress Annabelle had chosen. Nothing elaborate, just clean lines and quiet elegance. A beginning rather than a performance. "I never thought I'd do this again. Get married. Trust someone enough to build a life with them. Daniel isn't Brian. He sees you as an equal, not property. That's a completely different foundation." The past 6 months had been transformative. Brian's conviction made national news, sparking conversations about medical accountability and oversight. Annabelle had been invited to speak at conferences about patient advocacy. Her story had inspired legislation in 3 states requiring independent review of doctors with above-average complication rates. Together with Amanda, Helen, Lisa, and the other women Brian had harmed, Annabelle had founded the Jennifer Walsh Foundation. They provided free legal support for medical malpractice victims, created reporting systems for suspected abuse, and lobbied for stronger patient protections. The foundation was small, but growing. They'd already helped 15 women fight suspicious doctors. 2 physicians had lost their licenses as a result. It was a start, a way to make sure Brian's crimes led to actual systemic change. Annabelle had also published a book about her experience, not sensationalized or dramatic, but honest and practical. A guide for women suspecting medical abuse, how to document concerns, how to find help, how to fight back against powerful doctors. The book became required reading in several medical ethics courses. Annabelle's name was becoming associated with patient advocacy and reform. She'd rebuilt her identity completely separate from being Brian Malone's victim. Brian remained in prison, his appeals consistently denied. He'd tried contacting Annabelle twice through third parties, violating the no-contact order. Both times resulted in additional charges and disciplinary action. He'd learned, finally, that she was beyond his reach. Maya was 9 months old now, healthy and curious, and completely unaware that her existence had nearly cost her mother's life. She'd never know Brian, would never have to fear him or carry his cruelty. "Are you ready?" Ruth asked, peeking into the room. The nurse who'd first helped Annabelle was now a close friend, almost family. "I'm ready." The ceremony was small. Just close friends in Dr. Patel's garden, no pomp or performance, just people who'd helped Annabelle survive, gathered to celebrate new beginnings. Daniel waited at the makeshift altar, holding Maya. The baby was the flower girl, though at 9 months she mostly just looked adorable in her tiny dress. Daniel had become Maya's father in every way that mattered. He'd been there for midnight feedings, first smiles, all the small moments that built families. Annabelle walked toward them without hesitation. No father to give her away because she'd given herself away once and wouldn't again. This time, she was choosing freely, building something based on respect rather than control. Daniel's vows were simple. "I promise to see you as my equal always, to support your strength without trying to diminish it, to help raise Maya knowing that her mother's courage saved both your lives, to build a partnership, not an ownership." Annabelle's vows were equally direct. "I promise to trust you with my truth, even when it's scary, to build a life together based on honesty, to never forget that survival made me strong, but choosing to love again makes me brave, to be the kind of wife who partners with you, not depends on you." They exchanged rings, kissed, became a family officially, though they'd been building that family for months. The reception was joyful. The 6 women who'd survived Brian together celebrated not just a wedding, but everything they'd overcome. They'd gone from strangers bound by victimhood to sisters bound by survival and purpose. To Annabelle and Daniel, Amanda toasted, and to Jennifer, who didn't survive but whose death sparked a movement. To all of us, Helen added, for refusing to let Brian Malone define our stories. They raised glasses and celebrated life, survival, and the families they'd chosen. Late in the afternoon, Annabelle stood with Maya in her arms, watching Daniel talk with Dr. Patel about expanding the Foundation's medical services. This was her life now, purpose-driven, surrounded by people who valued her strength, free from fear. "Your father wanted to kill us," she whispered to Maya. "But we survived. We built something beautiful from his attempt to destroy us. You'll grow up knowing that your mother fought for you, that love is stronger than hatred, that women who stand together can change the world." Maya grabbed at her mother's hair, babbling happily. Daniel approached, wrapping his arm around both of them. "What are you thinking about?" "That I won." Annabelle looked at her new husband, her daughter, the women who'd become family. "Brian wanted me dead and forgotten. Instead, I'm here, alive, building a foundation that will protect women for generations. His name means medical monster now. My name means survivor who fought back. That's not just winning. That's total victory." "It is," Daniel kissed her forehead. "And it's just the beginning. The foundation is growing. Your book is helping women. You're changing the system that enabled Brian. You didn't just survive him. You transformed his evil into something that protects others." That night, after the celebration ended and guests departed, Annabelle sat in her new home, the one she and Daniel had chosen together. Maya slept in her nursery. Daniel was cleaning up from the party. Everything was peaceful, safe, normal. She thought about the terrified woman from a year ago, discovering insurance policies and murder plans. That woman had been certain she would die, had felt powerless and trapped. She'd been wrong about the powerless part. Annabelle had found power in places Brian never imagined, in other women who'd survived him, in Daniel's willingness to risk everything to help, in her own refusal to accept death as inevitable, in Maya's existence, proof that Brian's plans had failed. She'd taken Brian's attempt to kill her and transformed it into a foundation helping hundreds of women. She'd turned his crimes into legislation protecting patients. She'd made his name synonymous with medical abuse while making hers synonymous with survival and advocacy. Brian sat in a prison cell, his appeals exhausted, facing 65 years minimum. His medical license was gone, his reputation destroyed. His legacy was the foundation that bore his victim's name and fought against everything he represented. Annabelle had married a good man who treated her as an equal. She had a daughter who would grow up knowing her mother's strength. She had work that mattered and a family she'd chosen. "I won," she said aloud to the empty room. "I didn't just survive, I won completely. And every day I live happy and free is another day you rot in that cell knowing you failed. That's the best revenge of all." She heard Maya stirring and went to check on her daughter. In the nursery, she lifted Maya from the crib and held her close. "You're going to grow up strong," Annabelle whispered. "You're going to know that when bad things happen, you fight back. That women who stand together are unstoppable. That your mother loved you enough to risk everything, and that love is what saved us both." Maya yawned and settled against her mother's shoulder. Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect." Annabelle looked at her husband, her daughter, the life they'd built from ashes. "Better than perfect. This is real, safe, built on truth instead of lies. I spent a year trapped in Brian's nightmare. Now I get to spend the rest of my life living in this dream." They put Maya back in her crib and went to their own room. As Annabelle settled into bed beside Daniel, she felt complete peace for the first time in years. Brian Malone had tried to kill her. Instead, he'd made her stronger, fiercer, more powerful than she'd ever been. He'd given her a purpose that would outlive them both. He'd united women who would protect thousands of others from men like him. That wasn't just justice. That was transformation, taking the worst thing that ever happened and making it mean something beautiful. Annabelle closed her eyes and slept deeply, dreaming of the future instead of fearing the past. She'd won. Completely. Absolutely. Forever. And Brian would spend the rest of his miserable life knowing it.